Daniel Mercer was a simple man who lived a simple life. He worked as a cargo hauler on the outer edges of human space, moving supplies between colonies and alien trading posts. It was not exciting work, but it paid well enough. And it let him spend time with the person he loved most in the universe. His daughter Lily was 16 years old, with her mother's brown eyes and her father's stubborn spirit. She had been just 9 when her mother died from the Helix Plague, a disease that swept through the outer colonies and killed thousands before doctors found a cure. Since that terrible year, it had been just Daniel and Lily against the universe. They lived on Callaway Station, a human outpost that floated in orbit around a massive gas giant. Their apartment was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out at the swirling storms of the planet below. Lily would sit at that window for hours, watching the colors change and dreaming about the places she would visit someday. Daniel would come home from his cargo, runs tired and dirty, but he always had time for his daughter. They would eat dinner together, usually something simple that he cooked on their old stove, and talk about their days. Lily would tell him about her classes, about her friends, about the boy in her science group who made her laugh. Daniel would tell her stories about the strange aliens he met on his routes and the beautiful planets he saw from his ship. Life was good. Life was peaceful. Then everything changed. Daniel had been gone for 3 weeks on a supply run to the edge of human territory. It was a long trip, longer than he liked, but the pay was too good to refuse. He spent the whole journey thinking about getting home, about hugging his daughter, about the meal they would share. When his ship docked at Callaway Station, he felt the familiar excitement in his chest. He walked quickly through the corridors, nodding at neighbors and friends, but not stopping to talk. All he wanted was to see Lily. He knew something was wrong the moment he turned the corner to his apartment. The door was hanging open, half torn from its frame. Scorch marks covered the walls. The lights inside were flickering and broken. Daniel ran inside. The apartment looked like a battlefield. The furniture was smashed. The window was cracked. Lily's school books were scattered across the floor, their pages torn and burned. And on the wall, written in letters that glowed with fading heat, was a message. It was in Keth script. Daniel could not read the alien language, but he knew what the Keth were. Everyone in human space knew about the Keth Dominion. They were a powerful empire that had been threatening human colonies for decades. Their soldiers were brutal. Their leaders were cruel. And they hated humans with a passion that no one truly understood. Daniel stood in his ruined home and screamed his daughter's name. But there was no answer. Lily was gone. Station security arrived within the hour. They wore serious faces and spoke in careful voices. A team of officers documented the damage, while a detective named Samuel Perry asked Daniel questions he could barely hear through the ringing in his ears. "The message has been translated," Detective Perry said, holding up a small screen. "It says, payment for your species' insults. She will serve in our labor camps until her bones turn to dust." Daniel stared at the words. They did not make sense. His daughter had done nothing wrong. He had done nothing wrong. How could this be payment for anything? "We believe this was a random abduction," Detective Perry continued. "The Keth have been taking humans from border stations for months now. They use them as slave labor in their mining operations. It's a message to our government, a show of power." "Then do something," Daniel said, his voice raw and broken. "Send ships. Send soldiers. Get her back." Detective Perry looked at the floor. "The Keth Dominion is beyond our reach. Their territory is protected by thousands of warships. If we tried to invade, it would mean war. Millions would die. So you're just going to let them take her? Let them work my daughter to death? I'm sorry, sir. There's nothing we can do." Daniel spent the next week trying everything he could think of. He called old friends from his time in the military, men and women he had served with during the border conflicts years ago. Most of them offered sympathy, but nothing else. A few suggested mercenary groups that might help. But when Daniel contacted them, their prices were impossible. And even they admitted that reaching Keth space was almost certain death. He spoke to politicians, to diplomats, to anyone who might have connections to the Keth government. They all said the same thing. Negotiations would take years. The Keth did not care about human lives. There was nothing to be done. Daniel refused to accept it. He spent every credit he had on information. He bribed dock workers and cargo pilots. He paid hackers to dig through classified databases. And slowly, piece by piece, he began to learn about the Keth and their secrets. It was an information broker named Cole Dawson who finally gave him hope. Cole was a thin man with nervous eyes who operated out of a backroom on a station nobody talked about. He dealt in secrets, the kind that got people killed, and he owed Daniel a favor from years ago. "There's a planet," Cole said, leaning close so no one else could hear. "It's in the dead zone, the empty space between human and Keth territory. No one goes there. No one even talks about it. Why?" Daniel asked. "Because ships that visit don't come back. The Keth are terrified of it. They've forbidden any of their people from going anywhere near it." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. "What's on this planet?" Cole hesitated. "Ruins. Ancient ruins from before the Keth, before humans, before anyone. Some say there's technology there, weapons and armor from a race that disappeared millions of years ago. The Keth call them the Old Ones. They believe the Old Ones created everything, including them. And you think I can find something there? Something that could help me get Lily back?" Cole shrugged. "I think it's the only chance you have. The Keth have the largest military in the galaxy. You can't fight them with ships or soldiers. But maybe, just maybe, you can fight them with the power of gods." Daniel left that night. He sold everything he owned. His apartment, his cargo ship, his savings. All of it went to buy a small exploration vessel barely held together by rust and prayer. He loaded it with supplies, plotted a course for the dead zone, and flew into the darkness. Behind him, Callaway Station grew smaller and smaller until it was just another dot of light in the endless black. Ahead of him, there was only the unknown. But somewhere in that unknown, there was hope. And Daniel Mercer would find it or die trying. The journey to the dead zone took 12 days. Daniel spent most of that time alone with his thoughts, staring out at the stars and thinking about Lily. He wondered if she was scared, if she was hurt, if she was still alive. The thoughts kept him awake at night and haunted him during the day, but they also kept him focused. He would not stop until he found her. His ship was old and tired, and it complained constantly as he pushed it through space. Warning lights flashed. Systems failed and had to be repaired. Twice he thought the engine would give out entirely, leaving him stranded in the void to die alone. But somehow the ship kept going, as if it understood how important this mission was. On the 12th day, he found the planet. And appeared on his sensors like a ghost. A gray-green sphere hidden behind clouds of dust and radiation. There was no name for it on any map, no record of it in any database. It simply existed, silent and forgotten, in a part of space where nothing else lived. Daniel brought his ship down through the atmosphere, fighting against winds that tried to tear him apart. Lightning cracked across the sky, purple and strange, filling the air with electricity that made his instruments go crazy. For a moment, he thought he would crash, that his journey would end in fire and twisted metal. But at the last second, the storms parted, and he saw land below. He set the ship down in a valley between two mountain ranges. The ground was hard and black, covered in some kind of stone that looked almost like glass. When he stepped outside, the air tasted wrong, like metal and old dust. The sky above was the color of a bruise, dark and angry, with those purple lightning bolts still dancing in the distance. But it was the ruins that took his breath away. They were everywhere, stretching across the landscape as far as he could see. Massive towers rose toward the clouds, their shapes twisted and strange, as if they had been grown rather than built. Bridges connected buildings that should not have been able to stand, defying every law of physics Daniel knew. And everywhere, on every surface, there were symbols carved into the stone. A language from before time. Daniel explored for 3 days. He walked through empty streets that had not felt footsteps in millions of years. He climbed stairs that wound up into towers filled with dust and silence. He found rooms full of machines he could not understand, devices that hummed with faint power even after all this time. But he found nothing that could help him, nothing that could save his daughter. On the third night, sitting alone in the shell of a building that might once have been a home, Daniel began to lose hope. Cole had said there was technology here, power beyond imagination. But all Daniel had found was death. An entire civilization gone without a trace, leaving nothing behind but empty monuments to their own forgotten glory. He thought about giving up. He thought about flying back to human space and spending whatever time Lily had left trying to reach her through official channels. Maybe the politicians would listen. Maybe the diplomats would find a way. Maybe miracles were real, but Daniel had never believed in miracles. He believed in hard work and determination. He believed that a father's love could move mountains. And he believed deep in his heart that he had not come all this way for nothing. On the fourth day, he found the chamber. It was hidden beneath a collapsed tower, buried under tons of rubble that had probably been there since before humans learned to use fire. Daniel almost walked past it, but something caught his eye. A crack in the foundation, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through, with faint light spilling out from somewhere deep inside. He pushed his way through the crack, scraping his arms and legs on sharp stone. The passage was long and dark, twisting down into the earth like the throat of some sleeping beast. But the light grew brighter as he walked, and soon he could see without his flashlight. The chamber was beautiful. It was round and tall, with walls that curved up to a ceiling lost in shadow. Every surface was covered in paintings, murals that showed beings of light and darkness, creatures that looked almost human, but were clearly something else. They were tall and thin, with eyes that seemed to glow even in the paint. And they wore armor that shimmered with colors Daniel had never seen before. In the center of the chamber, on a pedestal of black stone, sat a suit of that armor. It was smaller than the armor in the paintings, sized for a human rather than whatever giants had once walked these halls. The metal, if it was metal, looked like liquid that had been frozen in time. It had no seams, no joints, no openings of any kind. It was perfect in a way that made Daniel's head hurt to look at. He walked toward it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Something was happening. He could feel it in the air, a pressure that built with every step. The symbols on the walls began to glow. The paintings seemed to move, the figures turning to watch him approach. Daniel reached out and touched the armor. Light exploded through the chamber. Images poured into his mind, faster than he could understand. He saw stars being born and dying. He saw civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. He saw the beings from the paintings, the precursors, as they called themselves, creating life on 1,000 different worlds. And he saw them leave, departing the galaxy for reasons he could not comprehend, but leaving behind gifts for the children they had made. The armor flowed around him like water. It moved up his arm and across his chest, covering his body in a shell of living metal. It did not feel cold or hard. It felt warm and alive, like a second skin that responded to his thoughts. When he raised his hand, the armor raised with it. When he thought about protection, a shield of energy appeared around him. When he thought about weapons, his fingers glowed with power that could level mountains. Daniel stood in the chamber, wrapped in the armor of gods, and understood. The precursors had known this day would come. They had seen somehow, across all the long years, that one of their children would need help. And they had left this gift, this incredible power, for whoever had the courage to claim it. The armor spoke to him, not in words, but in feelings and images. It showed him how to use its powers. It showed him the weaknesses of the Keth. It showed him exactly where his daughter was being held. And it showed him something else. Something that made his blood turn cold. The Keth had stolen from the precursors. Long ago, when they were nothing but primitive creatures on a primitive world, the Keth had found precursor technology and used it to build their empire. But they had taken that technology through violence, destroying every trace of the precursors they could find, erasing them from history because they were afraid. They were afraid that someone else might find what Daniel had found. They were afraid of this moment. Daniel smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a father who had finally found a way to save his daughter. It was the smile of a man who had been given the power of ancient gods. The Keth were going to learn what fear really meant. Daniel left the Forgotten Planet as a different man. The armor had changed him in ways he was still learning to understand. His body felt stronger, faster, more alive than it had ever been. His mind was filled with knowledge from millions of years ago, secrets and histories that no human had ever known. And his heart burned with a single purpose that nothing could shake. He was going to get his daughter back. His old ship responded to the armor like a loyal dog responds to its master. Systems that had been broken for years suddenly worked perfectly. The engine that had sputtered and coughed now roared with power. Daniel did not fully understand how the armor was doing this, how it was reaching out through his hands and fixing things that should have been unfixable. But he did not question it. He simply accepted this gift and used it. The journey back to human space took only 4 days. The armor had done something to the ship's drive, pushing it faster than should have been possible. Stars blurred past the windows like rain on glass, and Daniel watched them go, thinking about what came next. He needed information. The armor had shown him that Lily was being held on a moon called HFY, a Keth processing facility where new prisoners were sorted before being sent to labor camps. But the armor's knowledge was old, gathered from signals and data streams that had been floating through space for years. Daniel needed to know if Lily was still there, and he needed to know what defenses he would face. He went to Callaway Station first. The station looked the same as when he had left. A spinning wheel of metal and light against the darkness of space. But Daniel saw it differently now. The armor showed him things normal eyes could not see. He saw the flow of power through the station systems. He saw the radio signals bouncing between ships and communication towers. He saw the heartbeats of every person on board, thousands of tiny lights pulsing in the dark. He docked his ship and walked through the corridors toward the command center. People stared at him as he passed. The armor had changed its appearance to look more like human military gear, sleek and dark with a helmet that hid his face. But there was something about the way he moved, something about the power that radiated from every step, that made people back away without knowing why. Commander Patricia Holloway was waiting for him when he arrived at her office. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, a veteran of 30 years on the frontier who had seen things that would break most people. She looked at Daniel without fear, though he could see her pulse quicken when the armor's sensors scanned her. "Daniel Mercer," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I heard you left in a hurry a few weeks ago. Most people thought you had gone to die somewhere." "I went to find something," Daniel replied. His voice sounded different through the helmet, deeper and more resonant. "And I found it." Patricia looked at the armor. studying it with experienced eyes. That's not human technology. Not Keth either. What is it? Something older. Something the Keth have been afraid of for a very long time. Daniel stepped closer to her desk. I need information, Commander. The ship that took my daughter. I need to know where it went. Patricia was quiet for a moment, considering. She had been the one to tell Daniel there was nothing that could be done. She had been the one to watch him walk away broken and hopeless. Now he stood before her wrapped in power that made her instincts scream danger, and he was asking for her help. The Keth don't share information with us, she said carefully. But there are things we've learned from watching them. Patterns, routines. She pulled up something on her screen. Prisoners from this sector are usually taken to a processing facility on Veth 4. It's a moon in the Keth home system, heavily guarded, surrounded by military bases. If your daughter is still alive, that's probably where she is. How heavily guarded? Orbital defense platforms, ground troops, fighter patrols. The facility itself holds about 10,000 prisoners at any given time, with a staff of maybe 2,000 Keth soldiers. Patricia looked at him hard. Even with whatever that armor can do, you're talking about walking into the heart of Keth military power. One mistake and you're dead. Daniel nodded slowly. Thank you, Commander. He turned to leave, but Patricia's voice stopped him. Mercer, what are you planning to do? Daniel looked back at her. Through the helmet. His eyes glowed faintly with the armor's power. I'm planning to remind the Keth why their ancestors were afraid of the dark. He left before she could respond. The journey to Keth space took 6 days. Daniel spent the time learning more about the armor, pushing its limits, understanding what it could and could not do. The precursors had been beings of incredible power, and they had built their technology to match. The armor could generate shields strong enough to stop nuclear weapons. It could project beams of energy that could cut through any material. It could heal wounds, filter poisons, and keep them alive in the vacuum of space. But the greatest power was knowledge. The armor contained records of every civilization. The precursors had watched over the millions of years of their existence. It knew the history of the Keth better than the Keth knew themselves. And buried in that history were secrets the Keth had tried very hard to hide. Once, long ago, the Keth had been slaves. A race called the Vordak had ruled over them with cruelty and violence, treating them as nothing more than animals to be worked and killed. The Keth had suffered for thousands of years under Vordak rule, their spirits crushed, their hope destroyed. Then the precursors had come. They had given the Keth technology and knowledge. They had helped them rise up against their masters. They had guided them to freedom and watched as they built their own civilization from the ashes of slavery. But the Keth had been changed by their suffering. They had learned that power was the only thing that mattered, that the strong survived and the weak perished. Instead of being grateful to the precursors, they became afraid of them. What if another race found precursor technology and used it against the Keth? What if the Keth became slaves again? So they destroyed everything. They hunted down every trace of the precursors they could find. They burned records. They demolished ruins. They killed anyone who spoke of the old ones. Within a few generations, the precursors had become nothing more than legend, then myth, then forgotten entirely. But they had missed one planet, one forgotten world in the dead zone, where a chamber full of power waited for someone to find it. Daniel understood now why he had been chosen. Not because he was special, not because he was strong, but because he needed help. The precursors had left their gift for whoever was desperate enough to search for it, whoever loved someone enough to walk into the unknown and risk everything. They had left it for people like him. As his ship approached Keth space, Daniel felt no fear. The armor hummed against his skin, ready and eager for what was to come. His thoughts were clear, focused on a single goal that burned brighter than any star. His daughter was waiting for him, and nothing in the universe was going to stop him from bringing her home. HFY was a moon of ice and stone that orbited a gas giant in the heart of Keth territory. From space, it looked dead, its surface covered in white and gray, with no signs of life visible from above. But the armor showed Daniel what his eyes could not see. Beneath that frozen surface were dozens of military installations, thousands of soldiers, and one massive processing facility where prisoners were sorted, like cattle before being sent to die in labor camps. His daughter was down there. He could feel it in his bones. Daniel approached the moon from the dark side, using the planet's shadow to hide his ship from the orbital defense platforms that circled above. The armor's stealth systems wrapped around the vessel like a cloak, making it invisible to sensors and scanners. He slipped past patrol ships without being seen, past early warning systems without triggering alarms, past all the defenses the Keth had built to protect their prison world. He landed his ship in a crater, 1 kilometer from the processing facility. The surface outside was hostile, with no air to breathe and temperatures cold enough to freeze blood solid. But the armor kept him warm and fed his lungs with clean oxygen, walking across the frozen landscape as easily as if he were strolling through a park on a summer day. The facility rose from the ice like a fortress. High walls surrounded buildings of dark metal. Guard towers watched every approach. Energy shields shimmered around the perimeter, designed to stop anything from getting in or out. Behind those walls, Daniel could see the glow of lights and the movement of Keth soldiers going about their duties. He walked toward the main gate without hiding. The first patrol found him 300 meters from the outer wall. 6 Keth soldiers in combat armor, their gray skin visible through their helmets, their weapons raised and ready. They shouted at him in their language, demands that he stop and surrender. Threats of what would happen if he did not obey. Daniel raised his hand. The armor responded to his thoughts, sending out a pulse of energy that passed through the Keth without leaving a mark. All 6 soldiers collapsed to the ground, unconscious but alive. Daniel stepped over their bodies and continued walking. He could have killed them. The armor offered him dozens of ways to end their lives, each one more efficient than the last. But Daniel had not come here for revenge. He had come for his daughter. These soldiers were not his enemies. They were just people doing their jobs, following orders, probably with families of their own waiting for them somewhere. He would not kill unless he had no choice. The energy shields fell when he touched them, the precursor technology overwhelming the Keth defenses like a river washing away sand. Alarms began to scream across the facility, loud and harsh in the thin air. Lights flashed red. Doors slammed shut. Soldiers poured from barracks, grabbing weapons and running toward the breach in their security. Daniel walked through them like a ghost. Bullets bounced off his shields. Energy beams scattered harmlessly against his armor. Soldiers who got too close were knocked down by pulses of force that left them dazed but breathing. He did not stop, did not slow down, did not even look at the chaos he was leaving behind. His eyes were fixed on the building ahead, the holding center where prisoners were kept. The door dissolved at his touch. Inside, the holding center was a maze of corridors and cells. Row after row of small rooms with energy barriers keeping the prisoners inside. There were thousands of them, beings from dozens of different species, all of them taken from their homes and brought here to be sorted and sold into slavery. Their eyes watched Daniel as he passed, filled with fear and confusion and something that might have been hope. He found Lily in the 3rd row. She was sitting on the floor of her cell, her back against the wall, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked smaller than he remembered, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and bruises on her arms. She wore the gray uniform of a Keth prisoner, and there was a number tattooed on her forearm in their ugly script. When she saw him, she scrambled backward, terrified of this figure in glowing armor who'd appeared out of nowhere. Daniel deactivated his helmet, letting it fold away to show his face. "Lily," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Lily, it's me. It's Dad." For a moment she just stared at him, her eyes wide, her mouth open. Then recognition flooded her face, and she began to cry. "Dad? How did you find me? How did you get here?" Daniel disabled the energy barrier and stepped into the cell. He knelt down and pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tight, feeling her tears soak through the armor to his skin beneath. She was shaking, sobbing, clutching him like she was afraid he would disappear. "I'm here," he whispered into her hair. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm going to take you home. They said no one would come. They said humans don't care about their own. They said I would die in the mines. They were wrong." Daniel pulled back and looked at her face, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "They were so wrong. I would tear apart the whole universe to find you, Lily. There's nothing in existence that could keep me away." He helped her to her feet and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The armor extended, forming a protective bubble around them both that would keep her safe from whatever came next. "Stay close to me," he said. "We're leaving." They walked out of the holding center together, father and daughter, moving through corridors filled with unconscious soldiers and broken equipment. The alarms were still screaming. The lights were still flashing. And outside, Daniel could sense a large force gathering, preparing to stop them. The facility commander was waiting in the courtyard. He was a massive Keth, nearly 3 meters tall, with ceremonial scars covering his face and arms. Behind him stood 200 soldiers, all of them armed, all of them pointing their weapons at Daniel and Lily. "Human," the commander growled. "You have invaded Keth territory. You have destroyed military property. You have attacked soldiers of the Dominion." He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Surrender now, and I will kill you quickly. Resist, and you will suffer for years before death finally takes you." Daniel looked at the army before him. 200 soldiers, heavy weapons, armored vehicles in the distance, their engines rumbling, fighter craft circling overhead, waiting for orders to strike. He gently moved Lily behind him and faced the commander. "I am going to take my daughter and leave this place," Daniel said calmly. "Anyone who tries to stop me will regret it. This is the only warning I will give." The commander laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "One human against the might of the Dominion? Your species is arrogant, but this is beyond foolishness. You have no idea what you face. I know exactly what I face." Daniel's voice was cold now, hard as steel. "And more importantly, I know what you face. Your ancestors knew too. They remembered the ones who came before, the ones who gave your people freedom. But you tried to forget them, didn't you? You tried to erase them from history because you were afraid." The commander's smile faded. "Ask yourself something," Daniel continued. "Why are those stories forbidden? Why does the Dominion punish anyone who speaks of the old ones? What are your leaders so afraid of?" For a moment, no one moved. Then the commander raised his hand. "Fire." 200 weapons discharged at once. Energy beams and plasma bolts and metal bullets converged on Daniel from every direction. The air itself seemed to catch fire, filled with light and heat and death. When the smoke cleared, Daniel stood untouched. A sphere of golden light surrounded him and Lily, perfect and unbroken. Not a single shot had reached them. The commander's face went pale. "My turn," Daniel said. The armor exploded with power. Light blazed from every surface, blinding and terrible. Weapons shattered in soldiers' hands. Vehicles flipped and crashed. The commander was lifted from the ground by invisible force, suspended in the air, unable to move. Daniel walked toward him slowly, leaving a trail of unconscious soldiers in his wake. When he stood before the commander, he looked up at the massive Keth with eyes that glowed like stars. "You are going to deliver a message to your leaders," Daniel said. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the old power has returned. And tell them this: if the Keth Dominion ever touches a human again, I will not come to one facility. I will come to your homeworld. I will tear your civilization apart piece by piece until there is nothing left but memories and regret." He released the commander, who fell to the ground gasping, "Do you understand me?" The commander nodded, his eyes wide with terror. Daniel turned and walked away, his arm around his daughter. No one tried to stop them. The journey home was quiet. Lily slept for most of it, curled up in the small bed in the back of the ship with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Daniel had given her water and food, had cleaned her wounds and treated her bruises, had held her while she cried until there were no more tears left. Then exhaustion had taken her, pulling her down into sleep, and she had not woken since. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair and watched the stars go by. The armor had returned to its dormant state, folded away into a small device that hung around his neck on a chain. He could feel it there, warm against his skin, ready to wake at a moment's notice. But for now, he did not need it. For now, he was just a father bringing his daughter home. 6 months passed. The galaxy changed during those months. News of what had happened on HFY spread quickly, carried by rumors and whispers that grew larger with each telling. At first, the Keth tried to deny it. They said there had been a malfunction, an accident, anything but the truth. But too many soldiers had seen Daniel Mercer walk through their best defenses like they were made of paper. Too many witnesses had watched him face an army and win. The story could not be contained. Within weeks, the Keth Dominion began pulling back from human space. Border patrols that had been aggressive for decades suddenly disappeared. Trade routes that had been blocked were reopened. Diplomatic talks that had stalled for years began moving forward, with Keth negotiators suddenly willing to make deals they would never have considered before. Nobody said why. Nobody had to. Daniel and Lily settled on a colony world called Haven, far from the politics and tensions of the frontier. It was a peaceful place, with rolling hills of bluegrass and skies that turned pink and gold at sunset. Their house sat on a small hill overlooking a valley where farmers grew crops and children played in the fields. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, and that was exactly what they needed. Lily enrolled in the local school. At first, she was quiet and withdrawn, jumping at sudden noises and keeping to herself during breaks. The other students did not know what to make of her, this thin girl with haunted eyes who never talked about where she came from. But slowly, day by day, she began to open up. She made friends. She laughed again. She started to heal. Daniel watched her recovery with joy and relief. He had feared that the damage done to her in that prison would be permanent, that the bright and curious daughter he remembered was gone forever. But children are stronger than we give them credit for, and Lily proved it every day. She still had nightmares sometimes. She still woke up screaming in the dark. But she was getting better, and that was all that mattered. The armor stayed in a case in Daniel's workshop. He looked at it sometimes, felt its presence in the back of his mind, heard the whispers of power that it offered. The precursors had given him the strength of gods, and there were times when he thought about using it. There was so much wrong in the galaxy. So many people suffering, so many injustices that needed to be corrected. He could fix it all if he wanted to. He could reshape the universe according to his will. But the armor had shown him what happened to those who took that path. The precursors themselves had once believed they could make everything perfect. They had spread across the galaxy, guiding and shaping, pushing civilizations in directions they thought were best. And for a while, it had worked. The galaxy had been peaceful and ordered, a paradise ruled by beings of incredible wisdom. Then it had all fallen apart. The civilizations they had guided grew to resent their interference. Wars broke out, not against the precursors themselves, but against each other, fueled by anger and frustration at being treated like children. The precursors tried to stop the fighting, tried to impose peace by force, but that only made things worse. In the end, they realized that their greatest sin had been believing they knew better than everyone else. They left the galaxy and never returned. But before they went, they left behind gifts for their children. Technology and knowledge hidden in secret places, waiting for those who truly needed them. And they left a warning, written in memories that the armor had shared with Daniel. Power is not wisdom. Strength is not virtue. The greatest gift you can give another being is not to solve their problems, but to help them solve their own. Daniel understood now. He was not meant to save the galaxy. He was not meant to be a god or a hero or a legend. He was meant to be a father, to raise his daughter, to live a good life and hope that others would do the same. The armor was a tool for emergencies, not a crown to be worn one evening. As the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, Lily came to find him in his workshop. She was 17 now, taller and stronger than she had been, with a smile that came more easily and eyes that no longer looked so haunted. "Dad?" she said, sitting down on a stool near his workbench. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel looked up from the old cargo manifest he had been reviewing. "Of course, sweetheart. The armor. The things you can do with it." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Could you have saved everyone? All the other prisoners in that facility?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. It was a question he had asked himself many times. "Yes," he said finally. "I could have. And I've thought about going back. I've thought about freeing every human the Keth have ever taken, about destroying their empire completely so they can never hurt anyone again. Why didn't you?" Daniel sighed and set down the manifest. "Because the armor showed me something, Lily. It showed me what happens when one person decides they have the right to control everything. The precursors made that mistake. They became gods, and then they became tyrants, and then they became nothing at all. I won't follow that path." Lily was quiet, thinking about his words. Then she asked, "So what happens now? What do we do?" Daniel stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the valley was bathed in golden light, peaceful and beautiful. Children were playing in the distance, their laughter carrying on the wind. "We live," he said. "We heal. We build something worth protecting." He turned back to his daughter with a gentle smile. "The universe is full of darkness, Lily. There will always be people who want to hurt others, who want power, who want control. But there are also people who just want to live their lives in peace, who want to raise their families and watch their children grow." He walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. "Those are the people worth fighting for. Not by conquering their enemies, but by giving them hope. By showing them that even in the darkest times, there is still light. By being the kind of people who refuse to give up, no matter what." Lily looked at him, and he saw in her eyes the same fire that had driven him across the galaxy to find her. The same stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The same love that had saved them both. "Will the Keth come back?" she asked. "Maybe someday. Maybe not." Daniel shrugged. "But if they do, we'll face them together. Not as conquerors or gods, but as humans. That's all we've ever been, and that's all we need to be." Lily stood up and hugged him, and Daniel held his daughter close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Outside, the sun finished its descent, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, on a forgotten planet in the dead zone, ancient ruins stood silent and waiting. The legacy of the precursors slumbered in chambers of stone and crystal, ready for the day when humanity would truly be ready to claim its inheritance. But that was a story for another time. For now, Daniel Mercer was content to be a father, living a simple life in a small house on a hill, watching his daughter grow into the person she was meant to be, and that was more than enough.